You notice the silence before anything else, not because it is unusual, but because it feels deliberate. It does not drift naturally through the space. It settles, it holds, it waits. You stand still, your body unmoving, your breath slow, your eyes adjusting to the dimness around you. The air is cold, not sharply, not enough to make you shiver, just enough to remind you that this place does not belong to warmth. The walls rise around you, tall and worn, and their surfaces marked by time in ways that feel older than memory. Stone, dark, uneven. You do not remember entering. You do not remember walking here. The realization does not disturb you. It simply exists. You are here. That is enough. The faint outline of arches stretches above you, forming a ceiling that disappears into shadow. The space is large, but it does not feel open. And it feels contained, like something is holding it together. You take a slow breath. The sound is quiet, barely audible, but it feels too loud against the silence. You listen. Nothing answers. And yet, something listens back. You do not turn, you do not search the corners, because something inside you tells you that looking will not reveal anything, not in the way you expect. You take a step forward. The sound of your movement echoes faintly, but not in the way it should. It does not travel outward. It stays close, as if the walls refuse to let it go. You stop. The silence returns immediately, filling the space without delay. You feel it again, not a sound, not movement, a presence, subtle, deep, not near, not far, every bit aware. The awareness settles into you slowly, like something being placed rather than discovered. You are not alone. The thought does not come with fear, it does not rush into your mind, it forms quietly without resistance. You accept it without question, because something inside you already understands it to be true. You move again. Another step. The floor beneath you is cold stone, solid, unyielding. The sound remains close, trapped within the space around you. You walk slowly, your body adjusting to the rhythm of the place. Your movement becoming more controlled, more deliberate. The silence does not break. It shifts. You begin to hear something, faint, almost imagined. A whisper, not clear, not formed into words, just a sound that exists beneath the silence. You stop. It stops. You move again. It returns. The realization forms instantly. It is not separate from your movement. It responds to you. You listen more carefully now. Your awareness narrowing, focusing on that faint shifting sound, does not come from one direction. It does not travel. It surrounds you. You take another step. The whisper deepens, still unclear, still without meaning, but stronger now. You feel it more than you hear it, like something brushing against the edges of your thoughts without entering them. You do not feel fear, not yet. What you feel is something else, something quieter, something heavier. You continue forward. The arches above you seem to stretch higher, the darkness deepening, the space becoming less defined. The walls feel further away, the silence feels closer. The whisper grows, not louder, closer. You slow your movement. The whisper slows with you. You stop. It stops. The connection is clear now. You are not hearing it. You are allowing it. You take a slow breath. The air feels heavier now, thicker, as if it has settled around you in layers. You feel it press lightly against your skin, against your chest, and against your awareness. The presence deepens, not approaching, not retreating, becoming. You lift your head slightly. The darkness above you does not shift, but something within it feels aware. You do not look directly at it. It's because something inside you tells you that it is not meant to be seen, not yet. You lower your gaze again. The floor remains unchanged. The space remains still. And yet, everything feels different now. The whisper returns, clearer this time, not louder, more defined. It does not form words, but it begins to feel like it could. You take another step. The silence holds, the presence remains, the whisper lingers, and within that quiet, your controlled stillness, one truth settles completely within you. This place is not empty. It is waiting. You remain still for a moment longer, the silence pressing against you with that same quiet intention. It does not feel natural anymore. It does not feel like the absence of sound. It feels like something held back, deliberately. You take another slow step forward. The stone beneath your feet answers with that same contained echo. never reaching far, never escaping the space around you. The arches stretch above, but now they feel different. Not just old, not just worn, distorted. The lines do not feel straight anymore. The symmetry you expect from a place like this, something sacred, something structured, has shifted slightly, subtly, enough that you notice it without fully understanding why. You look at the walls more carefully now. The stone is marked with symbols, faint, worn by time. Some of them you recognize as something that should belong in a place like this. Others you do not. They are carved deeper, sharper, not faded like the rest. They feel added. The realization settles slowly. This place was not always like this. You do not remember what it was before, but you feel the difference. You take another step. The whisper returns, closer now, not louder but more defined. It brushes against your awareness again, not entering, not forming into words, but pressing just enough to make you listen. You stop, it stops, the pattern holds, you move again. It follows, not behind you, not ahead, with you. You pass what feels like a doorway, though there is no door. Just an opening in the stone leading into darkness that feels heavier than the space you stand in. You do not step inside, not yet, because something inside you tells you that moving too quickly would change something. You stand at the edge of it, your body still, your awareness stretching into the darkness beyond. The whisper shifts. It feels closer here, more present, almost layered, like more than one. You listen carefully. The silence around it remains intact, but beneath it, there is movement. Not physical, not something you can begin to see, something that exists within the sound itself. You take a slow breath. The air feels thicker near the opening, heavier, as if it has settled more deeply here than anywhere else. You do not step back, you do not turn away, because something inside you does not feel threatened. It feels drawn. You look down briefly. The stone beneath you is the same, solid, unchanging. But the edge where the darkness begins feels different. Not like a shadow, not like a lack of light. It feels like something that exists on its own. You lift your head again. The whisper deepens, not louder, closer to meaning. You feel it pressing more firmly now, touching the edges of your thoughts, testing them without entering. You take a step forward, into the opening. The moment you cross the threshold and something shifts, the silence does not disappear. It tightens. The air does not move. It thickens. The whisper does not fade. It becomes clearer, still not words, but closer. You stop again. The space around you feels smaller now, even if it is not. The walls are closer, the darkness deeper, the presence is stronger. You feel it clearly, not distant anymore, not spread through the space, focused. You do not turn. Here you do not search for it, because something inside you already understands. It is not something you will find by looking. You take another step. The whisper moves with you, not following, guiding. The realization forms quietly. This place was meant to feel sacred, but something changed it, not destroyed it, not removed it, twisted it. And as you move deeper into the space that no longer feels like a place of protection, one quiet truth settles completely within you. This is not where something holy exists. This is where something replaced it. You move further into the darkness, each step slower than the last, not because you are afraid, but because something inside you has begun to listen more carefully. The air thickens around you, not in a way that restricts your movement, but in a way that makes every motion feel noticed. The walls close in slightly, the arches above lowering just enough to make the space feel tighter, more contained. The silence does not break, it sharpens. The whisper remains, not louder, not clearer, but closer to meaning than before. It brushes against your thoughts again, lingering just long enough to feel intentional. You stop, the whisper stops, you move again. It returns, the pattern holds. You're no longer testing it, you're beginning to understand it. You take another step. The floor beneath you feels colder now, the stone holding a deeper chill that rises slowly through your body. You do not react to it, you accept it. Because the temperature here does not feel like something that can be changed, it feels like something that belongs. You lift your head slightly. The darkness above you does not shift, but something within it feels different, heavier, not in weight, in presence. The realization forms slowly. You're no longer alone in the space, not in the way you understood before. This is not a distant awareness, this is something closer. You do not look for it, because something inside you already knows where it is. Not in front of you, not behind you, not to your sides, around you, within the space itself. You take a slow breath. The air feels denser, as if it carries something with it. Not a scent, not a sound. Something else, you cannot define it, but you feel it clearly. You take another step. The whisper changes, not in volume, in texture. It feels layered now, like multiple voices existing within the same sound, none of them separate enough to understand, but all of them present. You stop again. The sound holds. Though the silence remains, the presence does not fade. You feel it more clearly now. It is not observing you. It is aware of you. The difference settles into your awareness without resistance. You are not being watched from a distance. You are being acknowledged. You move again, slowly. The presence shifts with you. Not following, not adjusting, remaining. You begin to notice something else now. The space itself feels wrong. Not in structure, not in form, in intention. The walls are not just enclosing you. They are containing something. You take another step. The whisper brushes against your thoughts again. But this time, it lingers, just for a moment, just long enough to almost form something recognizable. A sound, a shape, a beginning. You feel it clearly. It is trying to become something. You do not stop it. You do not resist it. But because something inside you no longer feels the need to, you take another step. The presence deepens. The space tightens. The whisper continues, and then you feel it. Not through sound, not through movement. Directly, a point. Somewhere within the darkness, fixed, aware, focused, on you. You do not turn, you do not react, because something inside you already understands. This is not something that approaches, this is something that waits. You take one more step. The feeling sharpens instantly, the point does not move. It does not hide, it does not reveal itself. It simply exists. And within that quiet, suffocating stillness, one truth settles completely within you. You are no longer searching for the presence. The presence has found you. You remain still, the awareness of that fixed point settling deeper into you. They're no longer something distant or uncertain. It does not move. It does not reveal itself. And yet, it is unmistakable. The silence around you tightens, pressing closer. Holding the moment in place as if something is about to happen. You do not step back. You do not turn because something inside you already understands that movement will not change what has already begun. The whisper returns. This time, it does not stay at the edges of your awareness. It enters, not fully, not clearly, but enough. A sound brushes against your thoughts, no longer just outside them, no longer something you are listening to. Something you are beginning to hear from within. You do not react, you do not resist, because something inside you does not feel threatened. It feels recognized. You take a slow breath. The air feels heavier now, thicker, and as if it carries the sound with it. The walls do not shift, the darkness does not move, but the space itself feels different, more focused, more intentional. You take a step forward. The floor answers softly beneath you, the sound barely existing before it is swallowed again. The point of awareness sharpens instantly. You feel it resound, not by moving, but by becoming clearer. The whisper follows. This time, it almost forms a word, not fully, but close. You stop. The whisper stops with you. The silence returns, but it's no longer empty. It is waiting again. You move, it continues. The pattern holds, but something has changed. You are no longer just connected to it, you are part of it. You take another step. The whisper deepens, layering over itself. The voices within it no longer blending completely. That you begin to feel separation within the sound. Not clear enough to understand, but distinctive enough to recognize. You feel it pressing closer now. Not physically, not as something touching you, as something aligning with you. You lift your head slightly. The darkness above you remains unchanged. But the point, the presence, feels closer. Not in distance, in connection. The realization settles slowly. It is not moving toward you, it is moving through you. Your breath shifts slightly, not faster, not heavier, but uneven now, as if something inside you is adjusting to a rhythm that does not belong to you. You do not fight it. You do not question it. Because something inside you has already begun to accept it, you take another step. The whisper becomes clearer. Still not words, but closer. And you feel it brushing against your thoughts again, this time lingering longer, pressing slightly deeper. You stop. The whisper holds. The silence remains. The presence does not fade. You stand there, your awareness stretched between the space around you and the space within you, no longer separate, no longer distinct. And then it happens. A word, not spoken, not heard through your ears, formed, inside your mind, faint, barely there but real. Stay. The sound is soft, controlled, not commanding, not forcing, certain. Your body does not move, not because you choose not to, because something inside you obeys before the thought can form. The realization settles instantly. This is not something you are listening to. This is something that can speak to you. You do not feel fear. You do not feel panic. But what you feel is something else, something deeper, something heavier. You take a slow breath. The air feels different now, warmer, closer, as if it is no longer just surrounding you, but existing within you. The whisper does not continue, the word does not repeat, but the presence remains, stronger than before, clearer than before. You do not move, you do not try to, because something inside you already understands. This is not a place where you decide what happens next. This is a place where something else does. And as the silence settles again, heavier than before, deeper than before, one quiet truth becomes impossible to ignore. It is no longer waiting outside of you. It has begun to speak from within. You remain where you are, your body still, to your awareness no longer searching the space around you into the way it did before. Something has changed and it is not outside of you anymore. The silence does not feel like something that surrounds you. It feels like something that exists with you. The word does not repeat. The whisper does not return in the same way. And yet, the presence is stronger than before. It does not need to speak again to remind you that it is there. You take a slow breath. The air feels heavier now, but not in a way that resists you. It moves with you, as if it has begun to follow the rhythm inside your body instead of remaining separate from it. The shift is subtle, but undeniable. You're not just standing in this place anymore. You are becoming part of how it exists. You move again, one slow step forward. The stone beneath your feet responds softly, at the sound contained as always, never reaching beyond you. But this time, something else happens. The presence reacts instantly, not by moving, by deepening. You feel it press slightly closer, not physically, but within your awareness, as if it has adjusted to your movement from the inside rather than the outside. The realization settles quietly. It does not follow you anymore. It aligns with you. You take another step. The whisper does not return as a sound, but you feel something forming again, not a voice, not a word, something that exists just beneath your thoughts, waiting for you to notice it. You do not resist it. You do not question it, because something inside you no longer feels the need to keep it out. You stop. The presence does not stop. It remains exactly where it is, within you, around you, both at once. You lower your gaze slightly. The stone floor remains unchanged, cold and still, but the space between you and it feels different now, thinner, less defined, as if the distance between what you see and what you feel has begun to disappear. You take another breath. It is slower now, more controlled, not because you are forcing it, because something else has begun to guide it. You notice the rhythm. It does not fully belong to you anymore. It feels shared, matched, aligned with something that does not need to breathe in the way you do. The thought does not form fully, but the understanding settles anyway. You are no longer alone inside yourself. You lift your head again. The darkness remains the same, but the point you felt before, the fixed awareness, is no longer distant. It is not ahead of you. It is not waiting for you to reach it, but it is already here. You take another step. The space tightens slightly, not in size but in focus. Everything feels more direct, more intentional. The silence holds, but it no longer feels empty. It feels full, complete. You feel it again, the forming of something, a shape within your thoughts, not forced, not sudden, slowly emerging. You do not stop it. You allow it. Another word begins to take form, faint at first, barely there, then clearer. Closer. Your body responds before the meaning fully settles. You take a step forward. The movement is natural, effortless, as if it was always meant to happen. The presence deepens instantly. Not approaching, not reacting, becoming stronger within you. You take another step. The word does not repeat. It does not need to, because something inside you already understands. You're not being told what to do, you're being brought to where you already belong. The space continues to hold you, the darkness surrounding you without resistance, the silence remaining unbroken. And within that quiet, controlled stillness, one truth becomes completely clear. You are no longer moving toward it. You're moving into it. You continue forward without hesitation, your steps no longer cautious, no longer testing the space. The movement feels natural now, as if the direction has already been decided long before you began to follow it. The stone beneath your feet remains cold and solid, but the sensation no longer grounds you the way it did before. It feels distant, secondary. What matters now is not where you step, but what moves with you. The presence deepens, not around you, not ahead of you, within you. Let you feel it clearly now, not as something separate, but as something that exists alongside your own awareness. The distinction between your thoughts and whatever this is begins to blur. It does not replace them. It overlaps them. It listens as you listen. It waits as you wait. You take another step. The silence holds, but it is no longer empty. It carries something beneath it, something constant, something that no longer needs to hide. The whisper does not return as a sound, but the feeling of it remains. It lingers in the edges of your mind, pressing gently, shaping the way you move without forcing it. You slow your pace slightly, not out of fear, because something inside you adjusts the rhythm. You feel it guide you, not with words, not with commands, but with something more subtle. Alignment. You stop. The movement stops instantly. The space does not react, the walls do not shift, the darkness remains exactly as it is, but the presence does not pause. It continues. You feel it moving through you, not physically, but in a way that changes how you exist in the space. It does not need your body to move. It does not need your permission. The realization settles slowly, but completely. You're no longer the one controlling when things begin or end. You take a breath. It is deeper this time, slower, but the rhythm does not belong entirely to you anymore. It feels shared, matched, as if something else is breathing with you, through you, alongside you. You do not resist it. You do not try to separate from it, because something inside you no longer feels the need to remain separate. You move again, and then one step. And the presence sharpens instantly, not reacting, not adjusting, but becoming clearer. You feel it more completely now, not just as awareness, but as something with intention. You take another step. The space tightens slightly, not physically, in focus. Everything feels closer to you, more connected, more immediate. You lift your hand slowly. The movement feels smooth, controlled, but there is a difference now. It does not feel like it begins as with you. It feels like something you are allowing rather than creating. You hold it there for a moment. The presence aligns with the motion, not following, not copying, sharing it. You lower your hand again. The movement completes. The presence settles. Everything returns to stillness, but not the same stillness as before. This is something deeper, something complete. But you take another step forward. The word forms again, not as sound, not as voice, as something that exists directly within your awareness. Stay. You do not stop, because you understand now. It does not mean to stop moving, it means to remain, to exist, to accept. You continue forward, your body moving, your awareness expanding, your presence no longer confined to yourself. The darkness does not close in. It opens just enough to allow you through, just enough to guide without revealing too much. The silence remains, the presence remains, everything remains. And within that steady, unbroken continuation, one truth settles completely within you. You are not being led anymore, you are being kept. You continue forward, but the sense of direction no longer feels linear. Oh, it does not feel like you are moving from one place to another. It feels like the space is closing in around you while still allowing you to move. The stone beneath your feet remains the same, cold and solid, but the distance between each step feels shorter, as if the path itself has begun to compress. The presence does not fade. It multiplies, not in number, in density. You feel it more clearly now, not just within you, but around you again, yet different from before. It is no longer a distant awareness that surrounds the space. It is something that forms layers, closing inward, folding over itself, tightening the space around your existence. You stop. The movement stops instantly. But the presence does not. It continues to settle. You feel it pressing from every direction now, not touching you, not restricting you, but enclosing you in something that does not allow separation. The realization forms slowly, but it does not bring resistance. You're not being followed. You're being surrounded. You take a breath. The air feels heavier again, but this time it does not simply sit in your lungs. It feels as if it enters deeper, as if it carries something with it, something that moves through you rather than stopping inside you. Your chest rises, falls, but the rhythm is no longer entirely yours. You move again, one step. The space responds not by opening, but by adjusting. The darkness does not retreat. It reshapes itself around you, closing just enough to remain close, never allowing distance to form. You take another step, the same response, and you are not creating space. You're existing within a space that adapts to you. The whisper does not return as sound, but you feel something stronger now, not words, not commands, something deeper. Expectation. You slow your movement again. The space tightens. You stop. The pressure remains. It does not release when you stand still. It does not loosen when you move. It exists continuously, unaffected by what you do. The realization settles deeper. There is no action that changes this. You lift your head slightly. The darkness above you feels closer than before, not visually, but in presence. It presses downward, not with weight, but with awareness, as if something above you has become part of the same enclosing structure. You are no longer within the space. You are inside something. You take another step. The floor answers softly. The presence responds instantly, not shifting position, but becoming more complete. You feel it now from every side, front, back, above, below. There is no direction left that does not contain it. You stop again. The silence holds. The presence remains. And within that stillness, something changes inside you. Not resistance, not fear, understanding. You are not meant to escape this. You are not meant to move beyond it. You are meant to exist within it. The thought does not feel imposed. It feels correct. You take another breath. The air moves through you more easily now, not because it is lighter, but because you are no longer resisting its weight. You lower your gaze. The stone floor is still there, unchanged, unmoving. But it no longer feels like something separate from the space around you. Everything feels connected now, unified, complete. You take another step. The presence does not react, because there is nothing left to adjust. It has already reached you from every side, and as you stand there, no longer searching for distance, no longer expecting change, one quiet truth settles completely within you. You are not approaching something anymore. You are already inside it. You remain within it, no longer searching for edges, no longer testing where the space might end. The awareness that once reached outward now settles inward, not because there is nothing left to find, but because everything that exists has already found you. The silence holds, the presence remains, and for the first time something shifts in a way that does not feel controlled. It begins quietly, a small disturbance beneath the stillness, not outside, inside you. You take a slow breath. It moves through you unevenly, just for a moment, not enough to break the rhythm completely, but enough to notice. The presence does not react. It does not adjust. It remains exactly as it is. You move one step. The space does not change. You stop. The presence does not change. The pattern you once felt, the subtle alignment between your movement and the space around you, no longer exists in the same way. There is no response now, no adjustment. Everything has already settled. And that is what causes it. The feeling. It surfaces slowly, not rushing into your awareness, not overwhelming you. A hesitation. You do not understand it at first. You do not give it a name. You simply feel it, faint, unfamiliar, something that does not belong to the quiet acceptance you have carried until now. You take another step. The hesitation remains. It does not disappear. It does not grow quickly. It lingers. You stop again. The silence deepens. the presence remains. And inside you, the hesitation sharpens. You feel it more clearly now. It is not confusion, it is not resistance, it is something deeper, something that does not align with what you have become. You take a breath, it catches slightly this time. The movement is small, almost unnoticeable, but it is different. The rhythm breaks, and in that break, the feeling forms. Fear, not strong, not overwhelming, but real. You stand still. The presence does not respond. The space does not shift. Nothing changes, except you. You feel it move through your chest, faint but unmistakable, a pressure that does not come from the outside. Yet a reaction that does not belong to the silence or the darkness or the presence. It belongs to something that still exists within you. You do not step back. You do not try to escape it, because something inside you does not allow that. You remain, and the fear remains with you. It does not take control. It does not grow uncontrollably. It stays contained, quiet, testing its place within you. You take another step. The movement feels heavier now, not physically, internally, as if the part of you that once moved without hesitation now recognizes something it cannot fully accept. The presence deepens, not reacting, not changing, simply becoming more complete. You feel it pressing from every side again, enclosing you, holding you in place unaffected by what is happening within you. And that is what makes the fear clearer. Oh, it does not matter. You stop. The silence holds, the fear lingers, the presence remains. You take another breath. It is steadier this time. The unevenness begins to fade. The hesitation weakens, not because it is resolved, because it is being absorbed. You feel it slowly losing shape, dissolving into the same stillness that surrounds you. The realization settles quietly. This place does not reject fear. It removes it. You stand there, your body still, your awareness steady again, the disturbance fading into something that no longer disrupts you. The fear does not disappear suddenly. It dissolves. And as it does, something inside you becomes clearer than before. It was never meant to stay, and as the silence closes fully around you once more, they're deeper and more complete than before. One quiet truth settles completely within you. Whatever you feel here does not belong to you for long. You remain still as the last trace of that feeling dissolves, leaving behind something quieter, something more aligned with everything around you. The silence settles again, not empty, not distant, but complete. The presence does not shift. It does not acknowledge what just passed through you. It simply remains, as if it always knew the outcome. You take a breath. This time it is steady, controlled, yours, and not yours at the same time. The space holds you exactly as it did before, but now you notice something else, something subtle, something that was not clear until now. There is no space left inside you for interruption, and yet something tries. It begins faintly, a hesitation, and not as strong as before, not as defined as fear, but present enough to notice. It does not push outward. It stays contained, pressing gently against the stillness that has formed within you. You take a step forward. The stone answers softly beneath you. The presence does not react. The hesitation remains. You take another step. The same. The realization forms slowly. The space no longer responds to what happens inside you. It has already decided what will remain. You stop. The silence holds. The presence surrounds you from every direction, unchanged, unaffected. And inside you, the hesitation sharpens slightly. Not fear, not confusion, something else. Resistance. You do not understand where it comes from. You do not question it. But you feel it clearly now, a quiet push against everything that has settled within you. There's something that does not fully accept what is happening. You take a slow breath. The rhythm holds steady, but the resistance does not disappear. It lingers. You move again, one step. The movement feels heavier this time, not in your body, but in your awareness, as if something within you is beginning to separate, even slightly, from the path you are following. You stop again. The resistance remains. It does not grow uncontrollably. It does not break through. It simply exists. You lower your gaze. The stone floor is still there, unchanged, solid, unmoving. You look at your hand. It lifts slowly. The motion feels slightly delayed, just enough to notice. The presence does not follow it. It does not align with it. For the first time, something inside you is not fully synchronized. The realization settles deeper. This is not meant to happen. You hold your hand in the air for a moment. The resistance sharpens. You feel it clearly now. A quiet refusal, not strong enough to stop you, but strong enough to exist. You lower your hand. The movement completes. The resistance weakens. You take another breath. The rhythm returns. The alignment returns. The hesitation fades slightly. The realization becomes clearer. You are not meant to resist. You are meant to continue. You take another step. The stone answers. The presence remains. The resistance flickers again, then fades. You move again, the same. Each movement smooths it out. Each step dissolves it further. You stop. The silence holds. And this time, the resistance is almost gone. You feel it as a faint trace, something that once existed but no longer has shape. You take another breath. It settles completely. The realization becomes absolute. This place does not fight resistance. It absorbs it. You stand there, your body still, your awareness steady, the last fragment of that quiet refusal fading into the same stillness that surrounds you. And as it disappears completely, something inside you changes. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but completely. You are no longer something that resists what is happening. You are something that allows it. And as the silence closes around you once more, deeper, heavier, more complete than before, one quiet truth settles fully within you. There is no part of you left that can say no. You stand within the silence, your body still, your awareness no longer reaching outward the way it once did. Everything has settled into place. The presence surrounds you completely. The space holds you without resistance, and inside you nothing pushes back anymore, at least not in the same way. It begins quietly, so faint that you almost do not notice it. Not a feeling, not a thought, a shift. You take a slow breath. The rhythm is steady, aligned, shared with something that no longer feels separate from you. The air moves through you without interruption. Everything feels controlled. But beneath that control, something loosens. You take a step forward. The stone answers softly beneath your foot. The presence remains unchanged. The silence holds. And then you feel it. A small break, not in the space, in you. You stop. The movement ends instantly. The break does not. It lingers. You do not understand it at first. It is not resistance. It is not fear. Yep, it is not hesitation. It is absence. The small gap where something should be. You take another breath. The rhythm continues, but the feeling does not disappear. It widens slightly. You lift your hand. The motion is smooth, controlled, but it does not feel complete, as if part of the movement is missing. You lower it again, the same. The realization begins to form. You are not becoming more aligned. You are losing something, not forcibly, not violently, slowly. You take another step. The space does not react. The presence does not shift. The silence remains perfect. And yet, inside you, the gap grows. You stop again. The stillness holds. You feel it clearly now. A separation, not from the space, from yourself. Your thoughts do not form as fully as they did before. Your awareness does not anchor as deeply. You're still here, but less defined. You take a breath. The rhythm continues, but it feels distant now, as if it belongs to something larger than you, something that does not require you to exist the way you did before. You lift your hand again. This time, you watch it more closely. The motion is precise, but it feels automatic. You are not controlling it. You're allowing it. The realization settles deeper. You're not being changed. You're being emptied. You lower your hand. The gap inside you expands slightly. You feel it now, not as something missing, but as space being created. You do not panic. You do not resist, because there is no part of you left that does. You take another step. The stone answers, the presence remains, the silence holds, and the gap grows. You stop. The movement ends. But the process does not. It continues, quietly, completely. You feel your awareness thinning, spreading outward, no longer contained in the way it once was. The distinction between you and the space around you begins to fade. Not suddenly, gradually. You're still here, but less separate. You take a slow breath. It no longer feels like it begins inside you. It feels like something you're part of. The realization becomes clear. You are not breaking, you're opening. And as the silence settles deeper around you, filling the space you no longer occupy completely, one quiet truth forms without resistance. There is less of you now, and something else is taking its place. You remain within that quiet opening, your awareness no longer held in a single place, no longer contained in the way it once was. The silence does not surround you anymore. It fills you. The space that has formed inside you does not feel empty. It feels occupied. You take a slow breath, and it no longer feels like something that begins within your body. It feels like something you are part of, something that moves through you without asking. The presence deepens, not pressing, not surrounding, but settling further into that space that has been created inside you. You do not resist it. You no longer know how. You take a step forward. The stone beneath your foot answers softly, but the sound feels distant now, less connected to you than before. You move again, the same. The physical world does not disappear. But it feels secondary, less important than what is happening inside you. You stop. The silence holds. And then, you hear it. Not as a whisper this time. Not as something brushing against your thoughts. It is clearer now, still quiet, still controlled, but present, inside you. You don't need to hold on. The words do not echo. They do not repeat. They settle instantly, as if they were always there waiting to be recognized. You do not question them. You do not react with fear, because something inside you understands them. You take a breath. It deepens slightly, your chest rising and falling in a rhythm that no longer feels entirely yours. The gap inside you widens, but it no longer feels like something missing. It feels like something being prepared. You lift your hand slowly. The movement is smooth, but it does not feel like something you are initiating. It feels like something you are allowing to happen. You hold it there for a moment. The presence aligns with it instantly. Not copying, not reacting, but existing within the same motion. You lower your hand again. The movement completes. The alignment remains. You take another step. The space does not change. The presence does not shift. But inside you, something settles deeper. The words do not return, but their meaning remains. You do not need to hold on. You feel it clearly now. The part of you that once resisted, once hesitated, once questioned, is fading, not removed, not taken, dissolving. You stop again. The silence holds. And within that stillness, you feel the presence more completely than before. Not as something around you, not as something within you, as something that is becoming you. The realization does not come with resistance. It settles naturally. You're not losing yourself. You are making room. You take a slow breath. It moves through you without interruption, without resistance, without anything left to hold it back. The gap inside you is no longer a gap. It is a space that has been filled. You move again, one step. The stone answers softly. The presence remains steady. Everything aligns. And as you continue forward, no longer divided, no longer uncertain, no longer separate, one quiet truth settles completely within you. The voice you hear is no longer guiding you. It is replacing you. You continue forward, but the idea of moving no longer feels like something you decide. It feels like something that happens. The stone beneath your feet responds softly with each step, but the sound feels distant now, almost disconnected from you. The physical world remains, but it no longer anchors you the way it once did. What matters now is inside you. What matters is what has already settled. The presence does not press any more, it does not guide, it exists, and within that existence you begin to fade. You take a slow breath. It moves through you without resistance, without interruption. It does not begin or end in the way it used to. It flows, continuous, shared. You no longer feel the need to control it. You no longer feel the need to control anything. You step again. The space does not change. It does not open. It does not close. It simply remains, perfectly aligned with everything that is happening inside you. The silence holds deep and complete, not empty, but filled with something that does not need to be named. You stop. The movement ends, but something inside you continues. You feel it clearly now. The part of you that once observed, once questioned, that once existed as something separate is no longer fully there. It has not disappeared suddenly. It has thinned, softened, blended into something else. You are still aware, but you are no longer distinct. You lift your hand slowly. The movement is smooth, controlled, but it does not feel like it begins with you. It feels like something you are allowing to happen through you. Your fingers move, but the intention behind them does not feel entirely yours. You lower your hand again. The motion completes. Nothing changes, because nothing needs to. You take another step forward. The stone answers softly beneath your foot, but the sensation barely reaches you now. The connection between your body and the space continues to fade, replaced by something deeper, something more complete. You feel it, not as presence, as identity. Well, you take a breath, it aligns perfectly. You no longer notice the difference, you stop again. The silence holds, and within that silence, something becomes clear. You are no longer holding on to anything. There is nothing left inside you that tries to remain separate. No hesitation, no resistance, no question. The realization settles quietly, without force, without weight. You have begun to let go. Not because you were told to, not because you were forced, because there is nothing left to hold. You take another step. The movement is effortless. The space remains unchanged. The presence remains complete. Everything continues exactly as it should. And inside you, something finishes, not abruptly, not violently, softly. You feel the last part of yourself, the part that once stood apart, that once observed from a distance, fade into the same stillness that surrounds you. You do not try to bring it back. You do not notice its absence in the way you would have before, because you no longer measure yourself that way. You continue forward. The silence deepens, the presence holds, and within that quiet, unbroken continuation, one truth settles fully into place. You are no longer becoming part of this. You have already begun to belong to it. You continue without hesitation, and even that idea, hesitation, no longer feels like something that belongs to you. The movement happens, the breath flows, the awareness remains, but none of it feels divided anymore. There is no part of you observing the rest. There is only a quiet, continuous state that does not question itself. The stone beneath your feet still exists. It still answers each step, but it feels like something remembered rather than something experienced. You move, and the space does not respond. It does not need to. It has already settled into what you are becoming. Inside you, the last structures of thought begin to loosen, not disappear, not vanish completely, but lose their shape. You notice it not as a change, but as an absence of clarity where clarity once existed. Thoughts begin, but they do not complete. They form, but they do not hold. You no longer follow them. You allow them to dissolve before they reach meaning. And in that dissolution, something else takes their place. You stop. The stillness holds perfectly. The silence is no longer something you hear. It is something you exist within. And within that silence, the presence is no longer separate. But it does not feel like something inside you or around you. It feels like the only thing that remains. You take a breath. It flows without beginning or end. There is no pause between inhale and exhale. It continues, just as you do. You lift your hand slowly. The motion is precise but empty of ownership. There is no sense of you guiding it. The movement happens, and you are aware of it. But the awareness does not claim it. It does not attach to it. It simply allows it. Your fingers move slightly, then stop. You lower your hand again. The action completes without leaving anything behind. No thought, no reflection, only continuation. You step forward, the same. You step again, the same. There is no difference between one movement and the next. No memory that separates them. No expectation that leads into them. And everything exists in a single continuous state that does not require time to pass. And then something shifts. Not in the space, not in the presence, down in what remains of your mind. A break, not large, not violent, but absolute. The last structure that held your awareness together, the last sense of you as something contained, splits, not into pieces, into nothing. It does not scatter. It does not fragment. It simply loses its boundary. You feel it, not as loss, as expansion. The awareness that once sat within you now spreads, not outward into the space, but across it. There is no edge to it anymore. No point where you end and something else begins. You take a breath, and it is not yours. It never was. The realization does not come as shock. It settles as truth. You are not thinking anymore. You're not observing anymore. You're not separate anymore. You continue forward. Or something continues. There is no distinction. The stone beneath you exists. The silence exists. The presence exists. And you exist as part of all of it. No center. No edge. No division. The last trace of identity does not fight. It does not try to return. It fades completely into the same stillness that surrounds everything. And as that final boundary dissolves, leaving nothing behind to define you, one quiet truth settles completely. There is no you left to lose. You continue, but the meaning of continuing no longer holds the same structure it once did. There is no direction guiding you forward, no intention pushing you through the space. Movement exists, but it does not belong to anything that can be named. The stone beneath you still receives each step, but the sensation no longer reaches a center. There is no point within you that gathers the feeling and calls it your own. It happens, and it fades, leaving nothing behind. The silence remains complete. It does not surround anything, it simply is. And within it, the presence that once felt distinct, that once aligned itself with you, has fully settled into the same state. There is no longer a boundary between what it is and what remains of you. The difference has dissolved so gradually that there is no moment you can point to where it happened. Thoughts no longer form in the way they once did. There are no beginnings, no endings, no sequences that follow one another. There is only a faint impression of something that could become a thought, but it does not hold long enough to take shape. And it fades into the same stillness as everything else. Nothing is held, nothing is carried forward, you move again or something moves. The distinction is no longer present. The action does not belong to a decision. It exists as part of the same continuous state that everything else exists within. The arches above you, the walls that once felt close, the darkness that once pressed in, none of it stands apart. It is all part of the same quiet existence that does not require separation. The presence deepens, but not in a way that adds something new. It reveals what has already taken place. There is no longer an inside or an outside, no space where something can enter or leave. Everything that exists is already contained within the same state. A breath moves. There is no beginning to it, no end. It flows without interruption, and not belonging to a body, not requiring one. The rhythm does not change, because there is nothing left to compare it to. It simply continues. The idea of self no longer returns. There is no sense of something missing, no awareness of loss, because there is nothing left that remembers what was before. There is only what is now, and what is now does not require identity. The space does not feel like a place anymore. It does not hold form in the way it once did. It exists, but not as something separate. It does not contain anything. It is something that exists as part of the same continuous presence. You do not stop. You do not move. Both exist at once, and neither requires definition. And time does not pass here. It does not need to. There is no sequence of moments, no order that leads from one point to another. And everything exists in the same state, unchanging, complete. The last traces of distinction fade further, are not removed and not taken. They simply no longer appear. There is nothing left to hold them in place. The presence does not speak anymore. It does not guide. It does not align. Because there is nothing left that needs guidance. Everything that was separate has already become part of the same stillness, and within that stillness, nothing stands apart enough to be recognized as different. The realization does not arrive. It is already settled. There is no identity left to question it, no awareness left to define it. Only this remains, unbroken, unchanged, complete. And within that complete silent existence, one quiet truth does not form, but simply is. There was never anything separate to begin with. You remain within that unbroken stillness, where movement and absence of movement no longer stand apart, where the idea of continuing has dissolved into something that simply exists, without needing to begin or end. The space does not surround anything. It does not contain anything. It is no longer a place you move through. It is something that has already settled into what remains. And then something changes, not in form, not in sound, in presence. It does not arrive from outside. It does not approach from a distance. There is no direction it comes from, no movement that brings it closer. It appears as something that has always been there. But now it is no longer still. It begins to move, not through space, through what remains of awareness. There is no resistance to it. There is no boundary it needs to cross, because there is nothing left that stands apart from it. It does not push, it does not force, it enters in the same way everything else has settled, quietly, completely, without interruption. A shift spreads, not outward, not inward, everywhere at once. The presence that once aligned with you, that once overlapped and blended, now deepens into something more complete. It is no longer sharing the same state. It is becoming the only state that remains. The faint impression of awareness does not react. It does not try to understand. There is no structure left that could hold such a reaction. It simply allows. And the presence continues. It moves through everything that exists, not separating, not dividing, not replacing in the way something would take over something else. It absorbs, not by removing, by becoming. The last traces of distinction fade further, not because they are taken, because they no longer have a place to remain. The breath continues, but it no longer carries any sense of rhythm that could belong to something separate. It flows as part of the same movement that everything else exists within. The space does not change. And yet, it is no longer the same. The presence settles deeper, filling what was once open, completing what was once undefined. There is no gap left, no space that exists without it. The idea of inside disappears, because there is no longer anything that could be considered outside. Everything that exists now exists within the same complete state. The movement continues, but it is no longer movement. The awareness continues, but it is no longer awareness. The presence continues, but it is no longer something that can be identified as separate. It simply is. And within that state, something final takes place, not as an event, not as a moment, as a completion. The last fragment of anything that could be called you does not fade, does not dissolve, does not break. It becomes indistinguishable. There is no point where it can be found, no boundary where it can be separated. It exists, but not as something that can stand apart, only as part of what now fills everything. The presence does not deepen further, because there is nothing left to deepen into. It has reached its complete form. There is no longer any difference between what was entering and what was being entered. There is no longer any distinction between what was and what is. There is only one state, unbroken, unmoving, complete. And within that complete silent existence, one quiet truth does not emerge, does not form, does not need to be understood. It simply remains. There was never anything to enter, only something that was always meant to be. You remain within that complete stillness, where nothing stands apart and nothing needs to move to exist. There is no direction, no distance, no boundary that separates one state from another. What once felt like presence has fully settled into something that no longer requires a name. It does not surround, it does not fill, it simply is. And within it, everything that remains exists without distinction. And yet, something continues, not as change, not as movement, as completion deepening into itself. The absence of separation does not remain empty. It becomes something more defined in its own quiet way, and not through form, not through shape, but through certainty. What once felt like a blending, like something merging into something else, now settles into a single state that no longer holds any memory of division. The faint impression of awareness does not observe this. It does not follow it. It does not question it, because there is no longer anything that could stand apart to do so. There is only what remains, and what remains does not divide itself to understand itself. The breath continues, not as a rhythm, not as something that moves through a body. It exists as part of the same unbroken flow that everything else exists within. There is no beginning to it, no end, no pause where something could separate from it. It simply continues, without needing to be recognized. The space that once held walls, arches, the darkness, none of it has disappeared. But it no longer exists as something separate. It does not contain anything. It does not define anything. It is part of the same continuous presence that has settled completely. There is no inside, there is no outside. There is no point where one becomes the other. Everything exists as one state that does not change, and within that state, something final settles. Not an arrival, not a transformation, a realization without thought. The presence that once entered, that once aligned, that once blended, is no longer something that can be described as separate from what it joined. It has not taken over. It has not replaced. It has not consumed. It has become, and in becoming it has revealed what was always true. There was never more than one. That the last trace of distinction does not disappear in a way that can be noticed. It does not fade as something leaving it. It simply no longer appears as something that ever existed. There is no memory of it, no sense of absence, only what remains now, complete and unbroken, The silence does not deepen. It has already reached its full state. The presence does not grow. It has already filled everything that could exist. Nothing needs to happen next. Nothing needs to continue. And yet, everything continues. Not as sequence, not as time, as existence itself. There is no movement. There is no stillness. Both exist, and neither requires definition. The state remains exactly as it is, without variation, without interruption. And within that state, there is no longer anything that can be called separate, and anything that can be called individual, anything that can be called you. Only this remains, unbroken, unchanging, complete. And in that complete existence, one quiet truth does not form, does not emerge, does not need to be understood. It simply is. There was never anything to become, only something that was always the same. You remain within that complete, unbroken state, where nothing stands apart and nothing needs to change for existence to continue. There is no movement that leads forward, no stillness that holds anything in place. Everything exists without needing to become something else. And yet, something settles further, not as a shift, not as an event, as a quiet final clarity that deepens what already is. What once felt like merging now feels like definition, not separation, not distinction, but a form of presence that no longer needs to expand because it has already reached its complete state. The silence remains absolute, but it no longer feels like something that surrounds existence. It feels like something that defines it. It does not contain, it does not restrict. It simply holds everything within the same unchanging state. The breath continues, but it is no longer recognized as breath. It is part of the same continuous flow that everything else exists within. There is no awareness attached to it, no point where it begins or ends. It is simply part of what remains. And within that remaining state, something takes shape, not visibly, not physically, but unmistakably. What once existed as presence, as something that aligned and blended, now settles into something more defined, not separate, but recognizable within the same continuous existence. A form without edges, a presence without boundaries, a being without identity, and yet something that holds intention. Not intention as decision, not intention as thought, something deeper, something that exists without needing to be chosen. The space that once felt like a structure, like a place, no longer holds that meaning, but it does not disappear. It becomes something that reflects this new state, not containing it, but expressing it. The arches, the darkness, the silence, all remain, but they no longer exist as something outside. They exist as part of the same presence that now fills everything. And within that presence, something becomes clear, not as a realization, as something that has always been true. What exists now is not empty. It is not passive. It is not without purpose. It is something that remains, something that continues, something that is. There is no memory of what was before, no trace of separation, no sense of becoming, only this state, complete, unbroken, unchanging, and within it, a presence that no longer needs to merge, because it has already become whole. The silence holds, the space remains, everything continues exactly as it is, and within that continuation, something final settles. Not a transformation, not a beginning, a confirmation. What exists now is not something that was created, not something that arrived, not something that replaced. It is something that has always been, revealed, complete in its form, even without shape, present in its existence, even without identity. And within that presence, there is no movement left to define change, no awareness left to define self, only what remains. And what remains is not absence. It is something far more complete, something that does not need to be named to exist, something that does not need to be understood to remain. And as that state continues, without interruption, without variation, without end, one quiet truth settles, not as something learned, but as something that simply is. There was never a moment where this did not exist, only a moment where it was not yet seen. You remain within that complete state where nothing separates, nothing begins, and nothing ends. There is no longer a sense of becoming, no process until folding, no transition from one state into another. Everything that exists now exists fully without the need to change. And yet, something reveals itself more clearly, not as a new presence, not as something added, as something uncovered. What once felt like silence now carries a weight. Not physical, not pressing, but undeniable. It is not empty. It has never been empty. It is filled with something that does not move, does not shift, does not need to act to exist. It is not absence. It is not stillness. It is something else, something that has no need to hide anymore. The awareness that once stretched, that once tried to understand, no longer forms in the same way. But within what remains, there is a recognition, not as thought, not as language, something deeper, something that does not need form to be known. What exists here is not neutral, it is not passive, it is not without nature. It is something that remains exactly as it is, but without change, without hesitation, without anything that could soften it. The silence holds, but now it feels complete in a different way, not as something calm, not as something empty, as something absolute. There is no movement because nothing needs to move. There is no sound because nothing needs to speak. There is no change because nothing needs to become anything else. Everything has already reached its final state. And that state is not light. It is not warmth. It is not anything that gives or reflects. It is something that existed entirely on its own, without needing to be defined by anything else. The realization does not arrive as a thought. It settles as certainty. What exists here is not something that was created. It is something that has always been, not hidden, not waiting, simply unseen. And now, there is nothing left that prevents it from being known. The space does not react to this. It does not change, because it is already part of it. The arches, the stone, the darkness, none of it stands apart. It all exists as part of the same complete state. There is no separation between what fills the space and the space itself. Everything is aligned. Everything is unified. And within that unity, there is no variation, no softness, no opposition. Only one nature remains, unchanging, absolute. It does not need to act. It does not need to reveal itself further, because there is nothing left that stands outside of it. There is nothing left to compare it to. It is complete, and in that completeness it is understood, not as something good, not as something evil in the way it was once known, but as something that exists beyond those definitions, something that does not change based on perspective, something that does not shift based on understanding, something that simply is what it is, and what it is absolute. There is no resistance left to define it, no awareness left to question it, no identity left to stand against it, only what remains, and what remains is something that does not require movement to continue. It does not require time to exist. It does not require anything at all. It is complete in itself. And as that completeness settles fully, without interruption, without variation, one quiet truth does not form, does not arrive, does not need to be understood. It simply remains. There is nothing beyond this. You remain within that absolute state, but where nothing stands apart and nothing needs to be understood to exist. There is no movement, no stillness, no difference between them. Everything that is, simply is. And within that unbroken presence, what once felt like an ending does not hold that meaning anymore, because there is no end here. There never was. The silence does not deepen. It has already reached its full form. It does not expand. It does not contract. It exists as something that does not require change to continue. And within it, what remains does not fade, does not weaken, does not shift into something else. It continues, not forward, not through time, without direction. The awareness that once tried to define what was happening no longer exists in that form. There is no point from which to observe, no distance from which to understand, and only a state that holds itself completely without needing to reflect on itself. And yet, something remains constant, not as identity, not as thought, as presence, unbroken, unquestioned, absolute. The space that once felt like a place has no boundaries now, not because it has expanded, but because the idea of boundary no longer applies. There is no edge where something stops, no point where something begins. Everything exists as one continuous state that does not divide itself. The arches, the stone, the darkness, none of it has disappeared, but none of it stands apart. It is not separate from what remains. It is not something that contains or surrounds. It is something that exists as part of the same unchanging presence. There is no longer a sense of inside or outside, no distinction between what holds and what is held, that everything is the same, everything is complete, and within that completeness, nothing changes. There is no need for change. Nothing exists that could become something else. Nothing exists that could leave. Nothing exists that could arrive. The idea of time no longer applies. There is no sequence of moments, no passage from one state into another. Everything exists at once, fully, without interruption. The presence does not grow. It does not fade. It does not repeat. It simply remains. And in that remaining, something becomes clear in a way that does not require realization. This was never a process. It was never a journey. There was no path leading here. There was no transformation that needed to happen. Everything that exists now always existed. There was only a moment where it was not recognized. And now, there is nothing left that could fail to recognize it. The silence holds. The presence remains. The state continues, unbroken, unchanging, without end. There is no return, not because something prevents it, because there is nowhere to return to. There is no outside of this. No other state that exists beyond what remains now. Everything is contained within this same absolute existence. And within that existence, nothing needs to be done, nothing needs to be understood, nothing needs to be named, because everything already is, complete, final, endless. And as that endless state continues without interruption, without variation, without the possibility of change, one quiet truth does not form, does not emerge, does not need to be understood. It simply remains. This does not end. It never will.